Hi there, my name is Shannon Columb and I am a student naturalist here at Schmeeckle Reserve. I've spent my morning searching for wild mushrooms and boy, I have worked up an appetite. Luckily, I have a sandwich right in my back pocket. Oh no! My peanut butter and jelly sandwich, it has mold on it! Oh man! Mold is a type of fungus, and when we encounter a fungus like mold on our food, we may create negative perceptions about fungus. Can you think of any other undesirable ways we may encounter fungus in our lives? That's right! Besides moldy food, we may also encounter fungi in the form of house mold, or as poisonous mushrooms, or as toenail fungus, and create those negative perceptions about fungi. Even though we may encounter fungi in some undesirable ways, fungi play a very important role in keeping the environment healthy by recycling nutrients, partnering with other living things, and by acting as a food source for animals such as us. So let's go see how fungi help an environment such as Schmeeckle Reserve. So, what are fungi? Well, fungi are living things that cannot produce their own food. Most fungi get their nutrition from eating dead or decaying things, but some other fungi get their nutrition from eating living things. Some fungi we cannot see because they are single-celled organisms, such as yeast. Other forms of fungi, such as mold, are multicellular. And these forms of fungi that are multicellular, they are made out of tiny microscopic strands called hyphae. These thread-like filaments are made out of fungal cells, and they can range in size from being a few cells long to a few yards long. Even though they may be extremely narrow, they are very, very efficient in collecting food for the fungus. They secrete digestive enzymes that break down organic matter that the fungus then uses for food. When hyphae mass together, they create a mycelium. Myceliums are vast networks of these hyphae that we can find in the soil.
Have you ever been walking through Schmeeckle Reserve or any other natural area and have noticed one of these poking through the ground? These are called mushrooms, and mushrooms are the fruiting bodies of fungi. Mushrooms have three distinctive parts: a cap, gills, and a stem. The gills of a mushroom release spores, which I'll talk about a little bit later, but not all mushrooms have gills. Some mushrooms have true gills while others have false gills. Other mushrooms also have microscopic pores, which will release their spores instead of gills. The stem of a mushroom connects the mushroom with the underground mycelium. Not all mushrooms grow on the ground, though. Mushrooms also grow on trees. Here are a few examples of mushrooms that grow on trees.
Mushrooms come in a variety of shapes, colors, and sizes. No matter what shape, size, or color a mushroom is, because it's the fruiting body of fungi, it is just like the fruiting body of a plant, and it releases something called spores. These spores are just like the seeds of a plant and can be dispersed by the wind, by animals, and by the water. These spores are so small that 500 to 1,000 can fit on a pinhead. Much of the work that fungi do is often overlooked. Decomposing dead things doesn't sound that appealing, but it's essential in keeping the environment clean. Every living thing dies. Death is just a part of life. Decomposition is the process at which organic matter, such as the log you see behind me, is broken down into its simpler inorganic materials that are then used by other living things as nutrients. One of the most important roles that fungi perform in the environment is decomposition. Alongside bacteria, they ensure that the circle of life continues in the forest. The next time that you go for a walk in Schmeeckle Reserve or any other natural area, I'd like you to consider how that environment would look if decomposition did not occur. There would be mountains of dead leaves, dead plants, dead trees, and dead animals, and that does not sound that aesthetically pleasing, does it? Even though we can't see bacteria and fungi, we can see their work of decomposition occurring over time. How does decomposition work, though, you ask? Well, it happens in stages. The first stage is fragmentation, and during fragmentation, earthworms and other soil-dwelling critters break up leaves and other decaying material on the forest floor into little tiny bits like this. By creating these fragments of decaying material, such as this leaf, it is increasing surface area for bacteria and fungi to grow on. The next stage of decomposition is leaching, and during leaching, rainwater dissolves the water-soluble minerals in the decaying material and releases it into the soil. In the next stage of decomposition, the fungi and the bacteria break down the decaying material even further. The next stage of decomposition is called humification, and that is when a dark and fertile soil called humus is created. Mineralization is the last stage of decomposition, and during this stage, minerals are released into the environment. These minerals were not able to be dissolved by water, but they were able to be broken down by those fungi and those bacteria. This is how the process of decomposition recycles nutrients back into the environment. By recycling nutrients, decomposition helps plants to grow. When plants are growing new stems, leaves, or fruits, they are using a lot of minerals and a lot of nutrients such as nitrogen, which is scarce in the environment. If it wasn't for decomposition, these minerals, these nutrients like nitrogen would be stuck in these plants and wouldn't be able to be reused by other plants. Does the process of decomposition remind you of another process that involves food scraps? That's right, composting. Composting is a process that replicates natural decomposition, but it is much more accelerated because it provides the ideal conditions for decomposition. These conditions include warm temperature, a lot of oxygen, nutrients, and moisture. According to Cornell University, 80 to 90% of compost is made up of bacteria. The rest of compost is made of fungi such as yeast and mold. Composting allows us to reduce the food waste and other household materials from ending up in landfills. According to the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, 94% of food waste in America ended up in landfills. All of this food waste could have been composted. It could have had a second life. It could have been returned to the environment as nutrients. If you are able and willing to, I really encourage you to compost your food scraps and other household items such as newspaper and cardboard. Not only does composting reduce the waste in landfills, but you are also helping the environment.
Decomposition is not the only way fungi contribute to the environment. Fungi also create mutualistic relationships with other living organisms that benefit both the fungi and the other organism.
Friends help one another. Can you think of a time where you helped one of your friends or one of your friends helped you? In the forest, fungi have a lot of friends. Fungi create symbiotic relationships with other living things. A symbiotic relationship is a relationship between two living organisms, where both of these organisms benefit from one another. Plants are one of those living things that fungi partner with.
When a fungus and a plant create a symbiotic relationship, the hyphae of a mycelium wrap around the root hairs of a plant. This creates a fungal root, or a mycorrhiza. This relationship is called a mycorrhizal relationship.
About 80 to 90% of plants have a symbiotic relationship with fungi. In these relationships, the fungi obtain nutrients and water for the plant, while the plant provides the fungi with food such as carbon dioxide and sugars that it creates through photosynthesis. Besides obtaining nutrients and water for the plant, mycorrhizal fungi have some pretty incredible powers. For example, there is one mycorrhizal fungus that is able to attract and kill springtails. Springtails are soil-dwelling critters that are very high in nitrogen. This nitrogen is then given to the plants. Some mycorrhizal fungi are also able to provide protection for the plants. Some are able to create chemicals that kill worms and nematodes that destroy root systems. Others are able to secrete antibiotics that kill bacteria before it harms the root systems of plants. Mycorrhizal fungi can also connect plants with one another. They can connect plants of the same species or plants of different species. For example, conifer saplings need a lot of nitrogen to grow. If a conifer sapling is able to create a mycorrhizal relationship, then that fungus can connect the conifer tree with a birch tree. And birch trees have a symbiotic relationship with bacteria that collect a lot of nitrogen. And by connecting the conifer sapling to the birch tree, then that fungus can help that conifer tree grow into a big and healthy tree. Plants are not the only living organism that fungi partner with. Do you know what this green stuff on this tree is? That's right, it's lichen, and lichen is not just one organism, it's two. Lichen is made up of an alga and a fungus. Just like plants, algae are able to photosynthesize. The alga in lichen provides the fungus with food, while the fungus in lichen provides the alga with protection. There are about 17,000 species of lichen in the world. They can be found on trees, rocks, and in the soil. No matter where they can be found, lichen play a very important role in the environment. Rocks may seem bland, but they are full of minerals. Lichen has the ability to break down rocks into these minerals and release them into the environment. This is a process called biological weathering, where the lichen is able to break down the rock into soil. Lichen can also act as a habitat for insects and other invertebrates, and they also can act as a food source for wildlife such as squirrels and deer, especially in the winter when plant material is scarce. Lichen is also an indicator species. An indicator species can tell us if an environment is healthy or not. Some species of lichen are sensitive to air pollution. So if you only see algae in an environment, that means that it might be polluted. But if you see alga and fungus have taken a liking to each other, then that environment has little to no air pollution. Fungi do not only help plants and algae, but they also help animals as well, including us humans. Fungi are also a great source of food for animals, including humans. One unseen fungi that we depend on for food is yeast.
Have you ever baked bread before? Bread and other baked goods depend on a reaction between yeast, warm water, and sugar. As the yeast breaks down the sugar, it releases carbon dioxide, and this carbon dioxide is the reason why bread and other baked goods rise. This single-celled organism allows us to have delicious bread, cookies, and cake.
Mushrooms, both farmed and wild, are also great sources of nutrition for us. Foraging for wild mushrooms is very exciting. You can find wild mushrooms in damp forested habitats, on the ground, on living or dead trees, or on the parts of dead trees such as stumps. These mushrooms can fall into three categories: delicious, medicinal, and deadly. So it's very important that you do your research before you start foraging for wild mushrooms. In the forest, your best friend will be ID guides such as these. It's very important that you are 100% certain that you've correctly identified a mushroom before you pick it. Some mushrooms are only able to be picked at a certain time of year, while other mushrooms may have deadly lookalikes. Even when you're 100% sure you've correctly identified an edible mushroom, it is very important that you refrain from eating it right away despite your excitement. Wild mushrooms should never be eaten raw. They should be taken home, cleaned properly, and cooked properly. And before you indulge, don't eat it all at once. Take a small bite of the mushroom because some mushrooms may cause stomach irritation or allergies. There are many places in Wisconsin where you can forage and harvest wild mushrooms. Schmeeckle Reserve is not one of those places, and that is because it is a protected area. You can, however, use Schmeeckle Reserve as an identification tool when you are identifying mushrooms. When you harvest wild mushrooms, it's very important that you only take as much as you're going to use. This is because these mushrooms are very important to the environment. You don't want to disrupt the ecosystem. Wildlife depend on those mushrooms for food. Those mushrooms also have to release spores in order to repopulate. By leaving mushrooms that you may want to take home, you are also providing others the opportunity to find these wild mushrooms for themselves. The best time to look for mushrooms is in the late spring, the summer, and in the fall. Here are a few species that you'll be able to find in not only Schmeeckle Reserve, but in central Wisconsin.
Morels are one of the most sought-after mushrooms to forage for. Not only are they extremely delicious, but they also only come out 1 month every single year, and that 1 month is May. You can find these mushrooms growing on dead trees such as elms, white ash, and cottonwood. They have 2 key distinctive features, and that is their distinctive cap, which is ridged and pitted inwards, and also their hollow interior. Unfortunately, these delicious mushrooms have a dangerous lookalike. False morels contain a chemical that can cause a person to become dizzy, to vomit, and in some cases even die. You can tell the difference between these 2 mushrooms because the false morel has a smushed looking cap that is wavier and appears to be bulging out. False morels also do not have a hollow interior. Their interior is filled with fiber or tissue. Another mushroom that you can find during the month of May are dierad saddles or pheasant's backs. These mushrooms can be found on fallen logs, on tree stumps, or growing on hardwoods such as elm, maple, or box elder. They can be found in the same place, growing year after year, until the entire wood that they are on is consumed. It's important that you catch these mushrooms when they're young because as they grow older, they become a bit tougher and are difficult to eat. An interesting fact about these mushrooms, as well as a way to identify them, is their smell. These mushrooms smell like cucumber or watermelon. Chanterelles are another delicious find in the forest. You can find these mushrooms between the months of July to September, and they grow in areas of open woodlands, and they grow on the ground. They are orange to yellow in color, and it's important that you don't mistake these mushrooms for their poisonous look-alike, jack-o'-lanterns. You can tell the difference between these two mushrooms because jack-o'-lanterns grow in clusters while chanterelles don't grow in clusters. Jack-o'-lanterns also have true gills while chanterelles have false gills. A mushroom that is very easy to spot in the woods because of its bright orange color is chicken of the woods. Can you guess what chicken of the woods tastes like? Yeah, it tastes like chicken. Chicken of the woods can also go by another name, sulfur shelf, and they can be identified by their orange color and their yellow to white bottoms. They do not have gills. They have microscopic pores that release their spores, and they grow in clusters of shelves on standing or fallen hardwoods such as hemlocks and oaks. It's important that they are picked when they're young because as they mature, they become leathery. These mushrooms are high in antioxidants and have also been known to reduce inflammation. What does this mushroom look like to you? Does it sort of look like a turkey's tail? Well, this mushroom is actually called turkey tail because it resembles a turkey's tail. These mushrooms can be found between the months of May and December, and they can be identified by their cap, which has very colorful bands that range in color from orange to cream. These mushrooms, another interesting fact about these mushrooms' caps are that they are fuzzy or velvety to the touch. The bottoms are full of pores, which release its spores, and they grow on any type of dead or rotting tree. There are several lookalikes to this mushroom, but fortunately they are not poisonous. These mushrooms are called honey mushrooms, and no, they do not taste like honey. They are named honey mushrooms because of their color, which is light brown to tan, which resembles the color of honey. They can be found growing around stumps and dead trees, and they prefer growing around beech trees. These mushrooms should not be mistaken for several of their poisonous lookalikes. Jack-o'-lanterns are one of those dangerous lookalikes. You can correctly identify these mushrooms by a few distinctive characteristics, such as their very thin black hairs on the top of their caps, as well as their white gills. To ensure that you've harvested the correct mushroom, I recommend that you do a spore print of these mushrooms. Their spore print should be white. Lion's mane, or bearded or combed tooth, is also another delicious find in the forest. These mushrooms can be found between the months of September and October, and if they're prepared right, they have the taste and texture of lobster. They can be found growing on stumps, wood piles, and tree wounds, and they grow on a variety of trees. These mushrooms have no lookalikes, and they have some really impressive benefits to human health. They have the ability to reduce fatigue. They promote digestion. They also can protect the liver, and they boost immunity. Hen-of-the-Woods is named because of its leaves or protrusions that make it sort of look like a hen. These mushrooms can be found between the months of August and October, and they grow on the ground around oak trees. Sometimes it's difficult for mushroom hunters to locate these mushrooms because they camouflage so well with their surroundings. These mushrooms can grow really large. Some can even grow up to 20 pounds or bigger. There are some lookalikes to this mushroom, but fortunately they are not toxic. Another edible mushroom is chaga, and chaga can be found on birch trees. These mushrooms are dark in color and have a cracked appearance to them. They are very high in antioxidants and make a delicious tea. The most ideal time to harvest these mushrooms is during the winter. Another mushroom that grows on birch trees are birch polypores. These mushrooms are known for their medicinal properties and can even be used as bandages in the forest. These mushrooms have antibacterial properties, which allows them to be great bandages, and they also have the ability to be anti-inflammatory and boost the immune system. I have only shown you a few species of mushroom that can be found in Schmeeckle Reserve or in central Wisconsin. Have you seen any of these before? Have you eaten any of these before? Let us know down in the comments, or post a picture of a mushroom that you found in Schmeeckle Reserve or in the central Wisconsin area. Nature has a plethora of talented artists, and one of those artists are mushrooms. Spore prints not only are beautiful works of art, but they are also a way to identify mushrooms. So once you collect a mushroom that you'd like to take a spore print of, you can first remove the mushroom cap off of the stem and place it on a piece of paper. It is usually best to do a spore print of a more mature mushroom because they have more spores than a younger mushroom. Next, you would like to cover the mushroom cap and paper with a bowl or cup, and this reduces the chance of those beautiful spores from flying away. Then you have to leave it for 24 hours, so then those spores can transfer onto the piece of paper. After those 24 hours, carefully remove the cap from the piece of paper in order to not disturb the spore print. And then once your spore print has been completed, then you can store it in a Ziploc bag in a cool, dark area. And these spore prints can last for many, many years.
Thank you for joining me on this exploration of how fungi play an important role in the environment. Even though some fungi may be undesirable, they play a very vital role in the environment by recycling nutrients, partnering with other living things, and acting as a food source for animals, such as humans. Fungi can only do so much for the environment, however, so it's very important that us humans also do our part in keeping the environment clean. I really encourage you to visit us here at Schmeeckle Reserve and see what mushrooms you can find. Thanks for watching, and happy foraging!